Welcome, everybody. My name is David Holliday. I think I know most of you here. I'm the NSE Vice President. I'm also the NSE Coordinator at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. Thanks so much for being here today. Just a couple of Zoom reminders. If you can keep yourself muted, just so we don't have extraneous noise as our presenters are speaking. I love seeing people on camera, faces on camera. If you're comfortable with that, it's fine to stay off camera as well. As you probably heard, this session is being recorded for folks that could not make it today. I'm really pleased to have a great group of experts and speakers on two different topics. One is working with international students, those here in the US on a visa, how they can participate in NSE, as well as students who have DACA status or are undocumented, and how they can participate in NSE as well. So I'm going to hand it over to Anna Oakes, who is the NSE coordinator from Minnesota State University Mankato, and she'll invite her team to present.
Hi, everyone. As David said, my name is Anna. I think I know most of you. I'm here with my colleague, Erica Dooley. She is our senior immigration advisor at the university. And then Masaki Hara, who is currently one of my grad students, but participated in NSE as an undergrad. So he's going to share his experience quickly, as well as an international student who participated in NSE. So we'll get going.
Say, Anna, if you want to switch your screens, we can see you're in presenter mode right now.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
You click
This one. Sorry, guys.
No, it's okay.
I wonder if I need to stop share for a second and then switch my personal screens here.
It could be.
Sorry for the technical difficulties.
No worries.
Okay. Okay, so if I do...
It would be fine as is if that's what we could make work.
Still in presenter? Are we good now?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right. Erica, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. Hi, everyone. My name is Erica Dooley. My role at Minnesota State University Mankato is F1 student advising. So making sure that I advise F1 international students, making sure they're staying in the bounds of their visa status.
So what Eric and I are going to mainly talk about today is we're going to talk about why we feel it's important to recruit and work with international students and promote NSE to this specific student population, and then talk about a few nuances that go along with working with international students. A little bit of context, Minnesota State University Mankato, we have about 15,000 students here at the university. About 11% of our student body is international students. So we have a very large international student population from over 105 countries. Over the last couple years, we've had a lot more interest. So this has expanded my relationship with Erica and her team, how we can work together. And so far, we've had about 5 international students actually to participate in NSE, Masaki being one of them. I do want to point out, as we talk a lot about how NSE fits with a lot of our institution strategic plans, our provost just made high impact practices part of the overall goal and curriculum of our students, and education and broadening opportunities were listed as one of those vital high impact practices. So this is a way that makes that option more accessible and obtainable for international students as well. So that's kind of our standpoint and viewpoint as going of why this is a really important topic to both Eric and I and myself. A couple quick facts that you may not know going forward. NSE has a really extensive resource page about working with international students. So in this time, Eric and I are going to cover absolutely everything. We're going to do the highlights, but I encourage everyone to go through that as a reference to come back to. It's for both incoming and outgoing situations, to refer to that in future if you are working with international students, because there's a few nuances with this as well. Right now, about 90 NSE locations accept international student, which is actually only about 60% of the universities a part of the consortium. So hopefully if your current university does not accept international students, maybe this presentation will encourage you to do that. And if you have any other follow-up questions regarding this, please reach out to Erica and myself, and I can connect with Erica if your university has questions about some things to go along with this. One of the common misconceptions that I've heard so far that I do want to start out with is that NSE coordinators do not need to be a DSO to have NSEs, to have international students at their campus. So you will accept them just as you would any other regular student, no matter if they are here on a visa or not. So I want to kind of just, when we're thinking about this, some benefits that we really work for recruiting international students or encourage them to participate in this. It's very similar to that with domestic students, you know, wider range of perspective and knowledge of the US, course offerings. But in a sense, a lot of our international students are really adventurous, and they're really looking for different ways to engage and integrate themselves in different parts of the US. And that is one, you know, this allows them to do so in an area that they don't have to get additional visa for. It's also really a great opportunity for students if they are don't have any family or relatives in their area. Proximity to family or home country connections has been a big thing that we've seen for students. They're able to go maybe spend a semester in California near someone that they know, have those family connections, explore post-secondary options, apply for OPT, which is the opportunity students can have to work in the field prior after graduation. Erica will talk more about that though in a second. And then also, again, we talk about affordability. Oftentimes students may need to take a break and go to maybe affordable school for a little while and not have to worry about additional visa options. But why is it benefit for universities to do this? What's the benefit for the university, both incoming and outgoing, as to why? So we really look at the recruitment and retention parts of it. Our university actually uses the National Student Exchange as part of a recruitment tool when we're doing international recruitment. Mankato is, for those of you who don't know, is about an hour and a half southwest of David's campus in the Twin Cities. So we are considered a more rural campus. Mankato is about a city of about 50,000 people. So it's often nice to know students as you can come to a small, safe location, do things, but you do have an option to go to a larger city and do those different things for a semester and still continue education. So it's really helpful for, you know, lesser knowing areas of the US for students in terms of recruitment. Lately we've seen an uptick in students who have really been interested in NSE our sessions because of this as well. Then retention, you know, typical things, weather, family finances, change in major, campus environment, all my reasons students need to transfer, but oftentimes that may delay their graduation. How can NSE be a great opportunity for them to take a break from their current school, get a new perspective, and then still stay on track to complete their degree? So we're all worried about making sure degree completion for students and they can achieve their goals, but maybe they need to kind of broaden that perspective a little while. So those are kind of the two benefits that we really see for our university of why NSE is so important in general, but also with our NSE, international students as well. With that though, advising things that Erica and I definitely have worked on the last couple of years that is important with is it's important to have a relationship with your immigration office. So immigration advisor approval prior to placement has been really important for us. It allows just to make sure that students are on track for everything. They might not have any additional potential visa issues coming up or things like that, or any holds in their student accounts. Here at MSU, we do require all of our students to meet with a financial aid advisor before they go, so they understand the budgeting of their program. since international students do not get financial aid, especially federal aid, instead of meeting with a financial aid advisor, they have to meet their immigration advisor as a quick sign off for their program. So it's not an additional person, it's just another person. So every student has to still meet with 2 additional people before they can be placed on the program. Eric and I have found this to be very helpful to have that immigration sign off, so they are also aware of where their advisees will be going for their semester abroad. At this point, I want to introduce Masaki Hara. He is currently my graduate assistant in our office, but while he was an undergrad, he actually participated in the National Student Exchange. So I wanted to give him an opportunity, since he was here in the office today, to kind of talk about why he did NSE as an international student and the benefits it had for him going on. All right, Masaki, take it away.
Thank you for introducing me, Anna. I'm Masaki and I'm from Japan. And yeah, I'm also international student at Minnesota State University, Mankato. So when I was undergrad student, I studied biology and zoology. And that time I was really interested in marine biology because I lived in coastal area in Japan and I often go fishing and I'm really interested in saltwater fish. But you guys know in Minnesota, there is no salt water. So yeah, I was looking for some opportunity. Then Anna recommended me join NSE program. And yeah, and I joined in for 2021 fall. And I went to University of Alaska Southeast. And yeah, it was really nice time because I took marine biology class and fish biology and also oceanography class. And I conducted flatfish morphology research. So we went to beach and collect flatfish and also, yeah, and take data and kind of like finding why body shape are difference in among different locations. And also I was working as a research assistant in oceanography lab, and I got a lot of real world experiences there. And after I came back to Minnesota, it was really helpful because, you know, when I apply internship, these experiences helped me to get new opportunities. And yeah, in this photo, this is a freshwater mussel survey intern. During summer, I was working at Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, and that's time also, my fieldwork experiences and research experiences, beneficial for me. So yeah, I highly recommend to many students to join NSE because they can get research experiences, leadership experiences. Also, they can learn other cultures. So yeah, that is my experiences.
Thanks so much, Masaki.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he did go fall 21. I apologize. I couldn't remember what semester he went. But one cool thing about Masaki, and I've kind of noticed, is he actually started off at our university as an intensive English language program student. So he actually has been here for a couple of years, and he's encouraged other students. The four other international students who've actually done this program have actually been because of Masaki. So, and his influence. So, and great student-to-student connections there. So at this point, I'm going to kind of hand it off to Erica, and she's going to talk about the different immigration responsibilities when it comes to working with international students, and just kind of knowing the different roles and how much the home university actually does versus the host university.
Exactly. Yeah. So kind of looking at each different responsibilities, we have our F1 student, we have our homeschool, and then we have our host institution as well. So starting with our F1 students, this is a list of those main responsibilities that these international students engaging in NSE need to be conscious of and consider. The first and foremost is F1 students must be in active F1 status. They need to be making sure that their CVIS, their immigration record, is active and they've been maintaining that F1 status. That visa stamp in their passport can be expired. That's okay. As long as they're maintaining F1 status, that F1 visa stamp can expire because they're just staying within the United States. They're not departing the United States. So it's okay if it has expired. Other items is just making sure that they report any changes with their US physical address. If they're moving states, that needs to be reported. With any changes, they need to make sure that they maintain health insurance as well within the United States. Other responsibilities would just be making sure that they stay in contact with their home institution, which I'll touch on this a little bit later, because the home institution will keep the SEVIS immigration record. We don't transfer that to the host institution. So that connection is really important as well. The student can also make sure that they're connecting with their host institution and that NSE coordinator just to make sure that they are aware of campus resources while they are away, whether it's for the semester or the year. And then after they're done with their NSE engagement, they can request the official transcript, make sure that those are sent to the home institution. And then most importantly also is making sure that the student does not work on campus and only works off campus with proper authorization, which is something Masaki kind of touched on. He was a success story of one of our students. Anna, if you want to go to the next slide. He was a student who engaged in a CPT, which is basically like an internship. So because the home institution keeps the SEVIS record and the international F1 student will have the I-20 from the home institution, they cannot engage in on-campus work at the away school, at the host institution. Okay, so, but what can work is if a student engages in CPT. So basically working off campus, all the work must relate to their field of study. Me being at the home institution, I would approve that CPT as long as I see that they have a job offer letter, as long as they complete the CPT paperwork, and as long as they register for at least 1 credit of internship. So as long as I see all of those items, I, at the home institution, will approve the student for this off-campus internship experience. And so that's what we did in Masaki's case, and he had a really great experience. He could get that real world experience with that marine biology with the ocean, because we are landlocked here in Minnesota. We do not have that here. So that was a really, really awesome opportunity for Masaki to engage in. Moving forward into kind of the responsibilities between the home institution versus the host institution. Specifically, I kind of touched on this already. The home institution needs to make sure that we are maintaining the F1 SEVIS record. So we are in close correspondence. I'm in close correspondence with Anna just to kind of see who is going to be engaging in NSE, make sure I see that in registration, make sure that they have health insurance, and make sure that I see their up-to-date US physical address, because all of that needs to be reported to the US government when we're registering the SEVIS record for that term. The most important thing too is just making sure that the student is not taking too many online classes as well. So making sure that the student has at least 12 credits, and of which 9 must be face-to-face on campus. As far as the host campus goes, and for the NSE coordinator at the host campus, the responsibility is kind of low. I mean, it's a low commitment. You don't need to worry about the SEVIS immigration record. You don't need to be reporting anything to the immigration. That's on the host, that's on the home, the home DSO, designated school official. So myself, who would be reporting that. So for the host campus, it's important that they are SEVP certified, basically making sure that they have F1 international students already studying at their institution. They also need to or can assist with providing campus resources just based on student needs. And then also helping the student report any changes to their US address or any enrollment changes that might happen internally on campus that I personally or Anna doesn't have access to. So again, it's a rather low commitment from the host campus NSE coordinator. Sorry, that's a mouthful. But that's in brief, kind of the different responsibilities. Like Anna said, we've had a couple of international students, and I've had many conversations with international students about this opportunity. So open to questions that you might have for our team.
And just one thing regarding insurance. So at most institutions, international students have to have their local unit of insurance. However, if you as the host institution, if you do require students to have that particular insurance, students don't have to have both. They can switch to whatever, as long as they have an active insurance plan, that's okay. So if your university requires it, that's fine. Typically the home university can waive it as long as we have proof that they're enrolled in that host institution's insurance.
We do have a question in the chat, maybe for Erica. F1 students that want to exchange to Canada, do they have to return to their home country to apply for the visa in order to enter Canada?
That's a really good question. We actually personally haven't experienced any F1 international students going to do the NSE in Canada. The most important thing would just making sure that the student has a Canadian visa. Unfortunately, I'm not up to date on the Canadian visa requirements or what visa type that would be, but they would need to make sure that they have the proper visa in order to study in Canada. You know, specifically on that question, if the student's F1 visa stamp has expired and they're going to Canada, in order for them to come back, they do need to factor in a visa renewal appointment. So that would be another kind of thing to consider and conversate with any international student interested in doing NSE in Canada.
One thing I've done for my study abroad experience working with international students, though, is they usually are able to apply for the visa at that, because at the countries they're going into is immigration, and that sometimes can be in the US. It just depends on where that student is coming from. There's different regulations between different students. So there's a couple links. I know Erica has one before about students can check is like, do I need additional visa? What does that kind of process look like too? So it's also going to depend on where that student is coming from with their for their visa.
Thank
David,
you.
I was just going to jump in. I haven't been introduced yet, but I'm Marissa. I'm going to be talking in the second half of things, and I just thought I would chime in just to add to what you all have already said, that it's pretty common for students in F1 status who are in the US who are looking to travel to other countries, either for NSE or for learning abroad kind of opportunities, just like Anna said, to be able to apply at that country's embassy or consulate in the US. They shouldn't need to travel to their home country to be able to do that. And part of the value of doing it here is that I think, and I don't know for sure, but I think that there might be some special provisions for students traveling to Canada who have valid F1 visas, that the Canadian government has slightly more relaxed standards in terms of what visa process those students need to go through if they're in valid F1 status in the US, and the Canadian embassies and consulates in the US would be really probably more familiar with that than, for example, the Canadian embassy or consulate in India. So I think they should start by contacting the Canadian embassy closest to them here. Canadian embassy closest to them here in the US.
Thank you. I asked the question. That's all very helpful.
At this point, that is what Eric and I have. Does anyone have any questions, additional questions then? I would recommend just checking to see if your institution does accept international students. Some of us kind of continue on what we had before in our profile and may not realize that we're one or the other, and that maybe you can accept international students, and you privileged check no. So I meet with students weekly, and then the first thing we do is go through the list of schools that do accept international students. And oftentimes they're always interested in the one that doesn't accept international students. So I recommend everyone just going through that list, and maybe we can get 3 or 4, maybe 10 more schools that can accept international students that previously thought they couldn't.
Thanks so much, Anna, Erica, and Misaki. I just put the link in here. This is the list, the public list of campuses that do accept international students currently, F1 students. And as Anna said, if your campus is not on the list, part of the membership submission form, coordinators know where that is. One of the questions is, will you accept international students? And so I think our speakers here showed that it's very low requirements of the host institution. So as long as you're SEVP certified, your campus should be able to accept international students. So we hope that a lot of you would reconsider if you're not currently accepting those. Thanks so much, Anna. Could you, do you want to stop sharing so I can switch to the next presentation? Wonderful, thank you. Show. Does the screen share look okay on your end?
Yep, looks good.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. I'd like to now introduce Marissa Hildongre, who's a colleague of mine here at the University of Minnesota, and Joara Jimenez, the Dream Center coordinator from Cal State Chico. And they're going to talk about NSE considerations for DACA and undocumented students. Take it away.
Thank you. So I'm excited. I'm Marissa, and I'm excited to be presenting with Joara today. We have sort of divided things up so that I'm going to do the first half of the presentation, and she's going to do the second half of the presentation. In my role at the University of Minnesota, we don't have a Dream Center. I run our university's immigration response team, and I am sort of the resource hub for undocumented and DACA and other immigrant students on the University of Minnesota campus. And so I'm really excited that Joara is going to be able to speak as someone who works in a Dream Center to some of her experiences and recommendations for working with these students. And I'm going to start off with the sort of depending on your perspective, either dry and boring or very exciting sort of history of what's going on with immigration as relates to these populations. I'm an immigration lawyer by training, which is why I couldn't stop myself from jumping in on the embassy and consulate question before. But so I'm going to run us through some of those sort of updates. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to sort of I'm not going to assume too much about knowledge. I'm going to give just sort of a brief overview to get everybody on the same page. So DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a program that was created in 2012. It was created through an executive order that was issued by President Obama. And it was intended to be this like short-term fix that would give some benefits to people who arrived here when they were young that met a number of different criteria and aimed to address the fact that there was this large group of people that were sort of coming of age, becoming high schoolers, becoming college students, and who were prevented from doing a lot of the sort of normal young adult things because of their lack of immigration status. I mean, just for a little bit of context and a little bit of editorializing, the oldest people who are eligible for DACA under the way the program was put together in the beginning, they're in their 40s now. And so there's still this narrative of like these young people with DACA. So much time has passed that we've really seen sort of a generational shift, and we'll talk more about what that looks like. But just to create some perspective, it was created 11 years ago, intended as a temporary fix, and it's still around in some form, but it doesn't quite look the same as it did when it started. So DACA authorization gives recipients two main things, and it's the federal government that approves a DACA application. It gives DACA recipients protection from deportation and work authorization. And then as a result of having those two things, there are a lot of other benefits that can flow from that. They vary state by state. So eligibility for a Social Security number, that's a federal decision, and that comes with the work authorization. But access to a driver's license, access to state or local or institutional financial aid, resident tuition rates, lots of these things flow from having DACA status. So those of us who have worked with DACA students over the years have seen that DACA really opened up a lot of opportunities for eligible students to do a number of things, higher education being one of the big ones. DACA as a program was on a roller coaster the whole Trump administration. One of the very first things that they did was to announce that they were going to rescind the DACA program. It was a roller coaster from that first moment. There have been more court cases on the topic of DACA than most of us can keep track of. Those are still ongoing, all these years later. And I'll talk more about sort of the status of things. But just to say, DACA has been and continues to be a roller coaster for the people who are eligible for it and for the people who would like to get DACA authorization but haven't been able to for one reason or another. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we're seeing is that more college students and sort of traditional college age students today don't have DACA than was the case 5 years ago or 8 years ago. And it's because they don't meet the criteria for one reason or another. Because it was intended as this temporary program, it wasn't written in a way that sort of had an eye toward longevity. It had very specific dates in it. And so people are, actually back one slide still. And so that's okay. So people are, too young, or they've been here since they were very young, but they didn't arrive before the specific date that's listed, or they didn't have the opportunity to apply prior to all of the litigation and efforts to end the program. I work with a student right now who, she wasn't old enough to apply for DACA before the Trump administration tried to rescind it. And so once she became old enough, she's applied for DACA. She's submitted DACA applications 3 separate times during these little windows when that opportunity has opened up in the middle of all of these court cases. And her case has never gotten far enough for DACA to be granted. She meets the eligibility criteria, but there's never been enough time between it being canceled and then back on and closed and then back open that it's never gone all the way through for it to be approved for her. I included some links in this presentation, not because I thought we'd look at them now, but because I figured maybe it'll be sent around afterwards. There's a lot of good research and information out there about national data, state level data about where undocumented students are, what the rates of undocumented students are, lots of different things that might be useful if it's a topic you want to inspect more carefully. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so in September, just a couple of months ago, a federal court judge, once again, he's a judge that's ruled on the DACA program before, he once again ruled that it's illegal. So basically the way that President Obama didn't have the authority to establish this type of program when he did it, and then the changes that President Biden made through a more recent memo and policy regarding the program are illegal, that's not power that lies in the executive branch, basically. And so for the time being, new DACA applications cannot be approved. Individuals who already have DACA continue to be covered by it. They're eligible to renew it, and they're still eligible to apply for advanced parole, which is travel permission to travel internationally under specific circumstances for students who have DACA. More litigation is coming, and actually the next slide is a slide has an image that I borrowed from this presentation that I'm crediting at the bottom, that's put on by the President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration, Forward.us, and the Dream.us. It's their sort of very well-informed guess as to what the litigation is going to look like and what the timeline is going to look like. And so the likely timeline is that DACA the issue will go to the Supreme Court again, and it's likely that the Supreme Court will end the DACA program when that eventually happens. This isn't imminent. This all takes a while to work its way through the courts, but that's sort of the writing that experts think is on the wall. If you're interested in DACA and advanced parole and international travel, which I know is not the topic of this webinar, but I know there are lots of people in this meeting who wear multiple different hats at their institution. So if you are, I recommend that you check out that presentation that I linked at the bottom. I think I have one more slide before I'll hand it over. So all of this is lead up to say that undocumented students are still in higher ed. Things are harder for them. There are more barriers than there were when DACA was more widely available, but undocumented students are still moving forward with their plans and their lives and their studies, in spite of the fact that there are more barriers to doing it than there were when DACA was more readily available. And colleges and universities are also really adjusting. They're having to change strategies that had worked well in terms of being able to offer on-campus employment or other options that work better for a population that has work authorization than for a population that doesn't. And it's hard to unlearn some of those patterns. Colleges and universities are having to rethink a lot of things in thinking about how to serve undocumented students. So this is a conversation that's happening across higher ed and student services and admissions in lots of places. But NSE has, from what I've learned from previous engagements with, with NSE, it's been a good option for undocumented students, and it remains a good option for undocumented students who want an opportunity to have a variety of experiences during their college career. And so I'm going to hand things over to David, and then I think he'll hand them to Joara to finish us off. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Marissa. So similar to international students, campuses are able to indicate whether or not they're able to accept DACA or undocumented students. This is the website, and all of these links that we've shared, I will share these out to the listserv along with to the NSE listserv, along with the recording of the presentation. But there is a website on the NSE site. It is password protected right now. Coordinators are the ones that can access it. So 80 campuses that indicate they can accept DACA or undocumented students. So this is also a call to ask campuses to update their information, to join or possibly leave this list. This is done through your NSE membership submission form. This is the question that is asked on that form. My campus does not consider immigration status when determining eligibility for admission or incoming student exchange, and will accept undocumented students. So just again, a reminder that coordinators, you are the ones that determine whether or not you show up on this list or not. I'm going to turn it over to Joara now.
Sure. Thanks, Marissa and David. Hi, everyone. My name is Joara Jimenez, pronouns she, her, ella. I am the coordinator of the Dream Center at CSU Chico. I've been here about for almost 2 years, and I have the privilege of overseeing the Dream Center and also supporting and serving our undocumented students, our documented students. And so I'll mostly be talking a little bit more about some things to keep in mind when supporting and serving undocumented students, because they are a very specific student population who, as Marissa said, they have additional barriers. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Next slide, please. So I wanted to start off by just going over a quick overview of the key term undocumented. And I got this from the Immigrants Rising Educational Resource Binder, which is an organization that's based in San Francisco, California. They do a lot of great work. But when we think of the word undocumented, it's not a one size fits all. It's more of an umbrella term because they might fall under they have different circumstances, different experiences. One of the most common ones being they entered without inspection. So maybe they entered without presenting themselves or for inspection or checkpoint to obtain permission. That's one of the most common ones that we'll see, or at least I'll see. So I'll be talking a lot about my experiences at Chico State. That's also that's also how my loved ones immigrated to the US as well. A lot of the times we'll see that our undocumented students were brought here at a very young age where they don't remember their home country by their parents. Another one that I'll see not so often is that maybe they might have entered the US with legal status. So for example, they might have entered with a visa and they remained in the country after that visa expired. Sometimes I'll see that with folks who might have like a traveler's visa or something along the lines of that. And those students will often come and utilize our services, utilize our center. Marissa talked a lot about DACA. So yes, folks who are undocumented who have either have had previously DACA or who currently have DACA. Again, that provides temporary protection from deportation, the ability to obtain work authorization, but please note that it does have to be renewed every 2 years, and there is a $495 renewal fee. The CSU system in California is really fortunate enough to partner with legal services providers. So we have 23 CSU campuses. All of the CSU campuses have a different provider based off of region, but our legal services providers have funds available to be able to cover these renewal fees for our students, which is game changing, because when I started, I had students who had to decide whether they paid rent or they paid their DACA renewal fee, which both is a basic need necessity to be able to work, and in lieu to be able to pay for rent. So that's been really helpful. They also currently have fees to be able to cover the naturalization fee, which is $725. We also have folks who are undocumented and might be in the process of legalizing. So they might be pursuing legalization through a family-based petition or a U visa, but there's a lot of worrisome anxiety that comes along with that as well, because some folks might be able to have to go back to their home country to be able to legalize. I've had students that fall within that category who have had to go back to Mexico or wherever they were born to be able to do that. And everything, turns out great and fine, but the students are worried throughout that process as well. We also have folks who might be quote unquote at risk. So their status might be in limbo due to shifts in policies or politics, right? When Trump came into administration and stopped accepting new applications, we have a lot of students very similar to Marissa who submitted their application and the window just wasn't long enough. I'll see a lot of students who are graduating and are just hoping that something changes so that their DACA can be approved so that then they could work after graduation. But I've had a lot of students who graduate whose DACA application still hasn't been approved because they're not accepting initial applications at the moment. Another situation might be personal circumstances such as funds, right? We're seeing that DACA renewal fee costs some money, so does naturalization. And so we are fortunate to have those resources available at our campus to help our students. Next slide, I think there's a little tidbit. But yes, regardless of DACA status, undocumented students can participate in NSE if they meet the requirements to do so. So it is a great opportunity for our students, especially because especially for students who are undocumented and do not have DACA, who wouldn't be able to take advantage of advanced parole. I've had students who take advantage of advanced parole, and they were really fortunate and really excited to go back to their home country and really sad to come back as well, but happy to have the opportunity. And I was mentioning to David earlier how our students who don't have DACA feel a certain type of way and also feel sad because they can't take advantage of advanced parole. So being able to take advantage of NSE and being able to go to a different institution within the United States is game-changing for them. But there are a lot of implications that come behind that and things that we need to keep note of. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give a brief overview of some of the limitations in higher education that undocumented students might face. So one of them being financial difficulties, not being able to cover basic needs. A lot of it goes back solely because they might not have the work authorization. So having to worry about food, rent, transportation, and also taking into consideration that if the student is undocumented, their parents are also most likely undocumented as well. And so a lot of the times students are thinking of whether they should ask their parents for money when their parents are already struggling financially and the student already moved far away, hours away from home. In some cases, we'll see students that are undocumented might have to pay out of state tuition rates, which is really unfortunate because, within the state of California, if they do not qualify for in-state tuition, then in lieu, they don't receive financial aid. And so they might have to pay out of state and not be able to receive any financial aid. They're also very limited in terms of scholarships that are available to them. that might require some residency or citizenship requirement. Also, as I had mentioned, keeping in mind that if our folks who don't have DACA wouldn't able to lawfully work after graduation, they might also have very limited resume history. And also note that the DACA card that they do receive, their work authorization card, does have an expiration date on there. And I've seen in the past that it does deter some employers away, or some employers might not be knowledgeable on what it is. And I've also have had experiences where students are in the DACA program and it expires and HR reaches out to them and says, you have until X date to give me your new card, or unfortunately you will have to let go. And so again, it is a great program, but there's a lot that comes with it as well. And also the uncertainty and constant worry of disclosing your immigration status, right? And so that's a huge thing to do. And if a student is disclosing their status to you, they have a big trust in you. And so always, if that takes place, always reinforcing that students, it's a safe space, that they can trust you. But it also takes a lot of courage for students to be able to do that, and the fear of deportation of themselves or their loved one, and also traveling outside of their home state, right? A lot of us, or at least in my experience, we're in California, and a lot of them haven't even left California. And so there might be some fear and some hesitation in terms of participating in NSE. And also uncertainty of the future as well. Everything's intensified whenever there's somebody new in administration. Next slide, please. So in terms of supporting undocumented students, taking into consideration the financial aid and affordability for our student population, please do note that they are ineligible for federal aid, so they wouldn't be eligible for Pell Grants, work studies, certain loans. They are eligible for state-based financial aid. And I do apologize because I'm speaking a lot of California, so I really encourage you all to connect either with your financial aid office to see what kind of aid is available to students and what scholarships they would be eligible for, and also maybe even offering a list of undocu-friendly scholarships that might be able to offset some of those financial challenges that they face. And one thing that also has been helpful is to identify an ally or a liaison. Some of your campuses might not have a dream center, but might have a go-to person like Marissa is. So identifying that person so that that connection can be made with the student. Also being aware of housing. I know that on some campuses for NSE, there might be some on-campus housing that is reserved for those students, but in the case that they are living off campus, being aware of those requirements. A lot of the times when our students try to live off campus, they might ask things for like a social security number, a background check, a pay stub, where if our students are, and I'm going to call it as they work under the table and they get paid in cash, they wouldn't necessarily have a pay stub. And so just keeping all these things in mind when, receiving and supporting our undocumented students. And also noting that because they are very limited in what they do receive for financial aid might not be able to cover all the cost of living on campus and doing all those things, which is why students, choose to live off of campus for that reason. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about some of the best practices that I've done at Chico State with our NSE coordinator, Kenya. So we do have a great partnership with our NSE coordinator. We've hosted informational sessions for our students in the past. I've also had my student staff meet with them as well to answer any questions that they might have before they start promoting it to students, so that they have that knowledge and that they feel comfortable promoting it to other students. The Dream Center at Chico State also offers ally training, so an opportunity for student staff and professionals to be able to learn a little bit more about the specific and unique experiences that our students face. And I've had students from the Study Abroad office who hosts NSE go to those peer ally trainings and learn a little bit more. And so that has also been really helpful in having a peer-to-peer contact and also a professional who we know is now certified to serve our students and who we feel comfortable doing that warm handoff. We also have a great partnership with our legal services provider. So when we did our informational session, we also invited them to be able to give a little tidbit about advanced parole and what that looks like, but also just provide a safe space to answer questions, address any concerns, especially when the real ID comes into play. I'm not too sure on how that might look for every state, but at least, one of the things that I do know is that for the real ID, our DACA beneficiaries would be able to take advantage of that. Unfortunately, our students who are undocumented and don't have DACA wouldn't be able to take advantage of that. So just something to know. And then also identifying undocumented liaisons on campus. So connecting the student to the liaison, of your campus or to all of you, and also identifying different allies and departments. So maybe having somebody from counseling services, someone from academic advising, basic needs, or housing to be able, again, do that warm handoff, because a lot of our students also face a lot of mental health issues. They need very specific services, and they need somebody who will be there, who's going to be an ally for them and be a champion for them, and who understands their experience, versus a student having to re-disclose their status, have to tell their story over and over again. And so when a student does want to go through this process, making sure that everything is set in place so that they are going to be able to succeed wherever they will be going. But that is my portion of the presentation, and I welcome any questions that you might have for myself, Marissa, or David.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jawada. There is a question about, can California state aid travel to other NSE campuses? I'm not sure if Jawada or anyone else on the line can answer that.
Yes, so if they do, for example, if they're in the state of California and they fill out the financial aid application for here, then it would be able to travel over to any other NSE campuses, and they can use that financial aid award package for wherever they choose to go to. So yes.
Yeah, and Jessica, double check with your financial aid office about policies like that. At University of Minnesota, our state-based aid or state-based grant does go with all NSE students, regardless of payment plan, the home pay versus host pay. But I know there are some campuses in some states that will limit state-based aid, maybe making it available to students on home pay only. So clarify that at your own school. I just had a quick question here about advising students, DACA or undocumented students, about traveling off the continent to places like Hawaii, Alaska, and then the Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, and Guam as well. I personally have sent DACA students to Hawaii and to Puerto Rico, but if anyone can speak to risks, things to keep in mind.
I'd like to try answering that question, but also Jawada might have other things to add too. So I would say that it in part will depend on what kind of identification the student has, and that may depend on the state in which they live. So for example, Minnesota just finally passed the driver's license for all law. So as of October 1st, you can get a Minnesota standard driver's license that without regard to immigration status. And so I use my standard Minnesota driver's license when I travel domestically. That's all the student would need to present. So I would think, so I wouldn't have reservations, for example, about sending the student to Hawaii. If they were going to go to Puerto Rico to something that's not a state, I would have them talk to an immigration attorney first, because there can be some funny things about how things happen in the airport on the way back, even if it is a U.S. territory. I've seen rumblings on sort of immigration lawyer listservs about different things that are happening in different locations. And so it would be good to be ready for and prepared to know what you might encounter and what kind of documentation you might need to show. That issue would generally be on the way back, not on the way there. Mm-hmm. And I also just wanted to caution people to think about, to be knowledgeable as someone sending students on NSE, especially undocumented students on NSE, to know about what your own state level policies are about immigration checkpoints or other places within states where state government is sort of taking on that role of immigration enforcement and checking immigration status, because that could be very dangerous for an undocumented student who gets to an immigration checkpoint and has to show documentation if they don't have it. So that takes a level of awareness, advising your student from where they're leaving from and where they're going to. That's an added layer in this conversation, I think. And I don't say that to scare people. I think that can scare people off. I don't intend it to. It's about preparing and having those conversations. I think for lots of students that won't be an issue, but you'll want to help them make sure of that before they take this on.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You know, always support the student through NSE knowledge and processes and things, but refer students back to the experts with regard to any immigration matters. You know, I do know, Marissa, just you touched on, there have been a couple of states, I think that you're right, that their state policies have changed. Can you also talk about states along the southern border, especially some, how far into a state there can actually be immigration checkpoints?
Yeah, that's kind of in flux. I mean, that had traditionally been 100 miles, but we're seeing Texas really expand what they can do with regard to that. So I think if we're thinking southern border, specifically Texas, I don't hear nearly as much about Arizona or New Mexico or California sort of taking that on at the state level. But I think students traveling to or from Texas, and I have no idea how many NSE schools there are in Texas, but that would be something especially important to consider. I also wanted to say, you know, I think California is sort of like the shining example of the kind of support that undocumented students can get in higher ed. For those of us who are not in California, I think that there may be more legal resources, immigration legal resources, than you initially realize that you can take advantage of, even if they're not as sort of well structured as they are at California institutions. For example, and I know not every institution has this, but the University of Minnesota has a student legal service office, and there are a couple of lawyers in that office who do immigration cases. And so they've been helpful in advising undocumented students about their options and helping DACA students renew their DACA or apply for advanced parole. So there are lots of networks that you would need to figure out within your own community or your own state to see what those resources might be, if you do need to look outside the institution.
Any other, I know we're almost out of time here, but any other questions or comments? Michael, yes.
Yeah, sorry, this is kind of directed towards Marissa. Do you know if there's a place or a location online we can find what states offer the real ID? You know, there's this federal, I think it's a federal requirement now. In Massachusetts, we have mandated that everyone has to have the real ID that certifies that you can travel in and out. So I'm thinking for NSE students who are undocumented, and if they're going to say travel by plane, for example, rather than driving in their own vehicle, if they have one, or public transportation like a bus. If an undocumented person is in a state that allows for a driver's license, does that necessarily allow them to get the real ID, or is it just like a limited driver's license?
Yeah, that'll vary state by state. So I just looked up, I've been sort of blissfully pushing my need to know more about real ID into the future as Minnesota keeps pushing it into the future. But I do know that you have to provide a lot of documentation that people who are undocumented, or even, well, I guess it depends on how the state does it. People who are undocumented are not going to be able to show the documents required for real ID. So I put a link into the chat where I think you can look state by state to see which states have already required real ID. But then as for what kinds of driver's licenses are available in different states, I can probably look and find a resource to that, not before the end of today, but I can send it to David to distribute to everyone. Each state has done it a little bit differently. So the law that Minnesota just passed specifically gives undocumented immigrants the ability to get a standard Minnesota driver's license. It doesn't have any kind of notation on it. It doesn't make any reference to immigration status. It's the driver's license that everybody who hasn't chosen or opted to get the Real ID at this point has. But some states have driver's licenses for undocumented folks, but their status is flagged, or it's a different looking kind of credential. So I do think that that's an important element of the evaluation of where students are going. Is it somewhere they can drive to? Is it somewhere, so a student in Minnesota who wants to do an NSE exchange to somewhere in Wisconsin, we probably wouldn't have to think about all of those things. But if they're going to be flying across the country, then that's definitely an important conversation to have.
Okay, I do want to respect everybody's time here and end the session. I really, really appreciate all of the presenters' time and efforts in preparing for today and being part of this session. As I said earlier, I will share the recording as well as a lot of the links that were provided throughout the session. Appreciate you being here today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.
Can I put that final link in the chat, David? I think I found the one that I want you to send along to people.
That sounds great. Yeah, if you want to put it in here.
It's fine that some people are still in here. It's this higher ed immigration portal, and I referenced some of their resources. Those were the links that are in my presentation, but it has a map, and if you click on each individual state and then click on learn more, one of the criteria that they have like a state policies section, and driver's licenses almost all the way near the bottom. But I think for each state, they talk about the sort of the status of eligibility for driver's licenses. So I don't know that there's a list as such. People would probably have to look state by state, but this is a really informative tool.
I think we added this link actually.
I think you're right. When we had that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to double check that. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, any other resources, links that you can think of that might be helpful, feel free to send them my way.
Sure. I added my email in the chat and I didn't get a chance to tell everyone before they left, but I'm available if anybody has any questions or needs to get connected to a legal resource. We have a really great partnership with them where they're super passionate about helping students who are interested in coming to Chico State or within the state of California, or students who are interested in traveling outside of the state. So I can always be of a resource for that. And you can feel free to share my email with them if you do end up sending out the PowerPoint, so they could reach out to me if they have any questions.
That sounds great. I appreciate that. Marissa, do you mind if I share your email?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Anybody that's here, do you have questions for the presenters? They might just be away from their computer. So anyways, I appreciate your time. Thanks again, Marissa and Joara. Appreciate it so much.
Thank
Absolutely.
you. Thanks, Marissa, for answering all the questions. I'm very knowledgeable within the state of California, but not outside. So I appreciate your insight and your input.
Oh, absolutely. It was a great balance. I think it was super, super good to have your knowledge and expertise. So I'm excited. Thanks for the good pairing, David. It was great.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, thanks so much. Take care.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.